My parents skipped my wedding to go on a cruise with my sister. Mom texted, "She needs us. You're used to being on your own." I replied, "All right." That afternoon she tried pulling $1,200 from my account. I shut down every access they had. 2 hours later she called screaming, but it was just the beginning. 2 weeks before my wedding, my parents chose a cruise over me. Not metaphorically, not emotionally, literally. They booked a last-minute Bahamas cruise with my sister and told me they wouldn't be at the wedding. I didn't find out from them either. Kayla texted me like it was no big deal. Said they'd already paid for everything and didn't want to let the tickets go to waste. I didn't even respond right away. I was shaking, holding my phone, waiting for the actual message from my parents to explain. It never came. So I messaged my mom asking if it was true. She replied, "She needs us. You're used to being on your own." That was the moment everything flipped. She could have just said sorry. He could have lied even. Made up an emergency. But no, she told me I was too self-sufficient for love. That I didn't need them so they wouldn't bother showing up. It felt like the last slap in a lifetime of being the backup daughter. Kayla has always been the one they worry about. The one they coddle. She wrecked 2 cars by the time she was 23. My dad bought her a third. I worked through college, paid rent on my parents' house when they were behind on the mortgage, and still got called ungrateful when I asked for help just once. I told my fiancé Eric, that night I didn't want the wedding anymore. Not the guests. Not the reception. Just a ceremony with the people who actually gave a damn. He didn't argue. He'd seen what they'd done to me for years. But the moment I canceled the reception, something snapped in me. I went through every single financial tie I still had with my parents. Old shared accounts, utility logins, emergency authorizations I'd left open out of obligation. I started severing everything. Changed passwords. Revoked access. Killed the just-in-case credit card they used a few times when things got tight. I thought I had it all locked. Then 4 days before the wedding I got a bank alert. $1,200 withdrawal attempt from an old joint account. Denied. My mother. She hadn't spoken to me since telling me she was skipping my wedding. But she still had the audacity to try and take money from my savings. No explanation. No request. Just tried to pull it like it was hers. I closed the account within an hour. Moved the remaining balance. Froze anything I hadn't already nuked. I didn't text her. Didn't warn her. Let her find out the same way I found out about the cruise. Cold and quiet. The day of the wedding my phone rang. Her name lit up the screen. I didn't want to answer but I did. She didn't say congratulations. Didn't ask how it went. She was screaming. Screaming because she couldn't access the money. Screaming that I'd betrayed them. Screaming that she deserved it after all they'd done for me. I said one thing. From now on let your other daughter support you, not me. I hung up. Blocked her number. I thought that was the worst of it. But it wasn't. That was just the beginning. After I hung up on my mother on my wedding day I expected a blow-up. I expected long texts, guilt trips, maybe even some dramatic meltdown posted on Facebook. What I didn't expect was silence. 3 days passed. Then 5. Then a week. Felt strange. After a lifetime of them monitoring every decision I made, the lack of noise was almost unsettling. I figured they were busy on the cruise, telling everyone how their poor daughter abandoned them financially and emotionally. That was the usual narrative. Eric and I spent that week settling into our new routine. We were staying at his house, the one he'd renovated before proposing. My parents had been living in the small guest house on the property for almost a year. Their apartment lease had fallen through, and they asked if they could stay for a little while. Eric said yes before I even had the chance to think. He believed it would bring us closer. Looking back, I can't blame him. He still thought they were just a normal family with quirks. He didn't know they were a slow-moving storm that always found a new place to strike. 2 days after the wedding, Eric suggested we tighten up some security around the property. We had already planned to change the locks after the wedding, mostly because the set on the guest house was old. But now it felt necessary. My parents had always behaved as if that guest house was their permanent property. They decorated it. They rearranged things that didn't belong to them. They spoke about it like they'd earned it somehow. The locks were changed the next morning. Simple, quiet routine. I didn't feel guilty. Not even a little. 4 days later, my parents returned from the cruise. I knew because Eric's motion camera pinged on his phone while we were eating dinner. It showed my dad trying his old key on the guest house door. Then my mom trying hers. Then both of them staring at the door as if it had personally betrayed them. They stood there for almost 10 minutes. My mom tried the handle over and over. My dad started checking windows. They didn't call me. Not yet. They went through the whole property, disappearing from one camera and popping up on another as they checked every possible entrance. When they finally realized nothing opened for them, that's when my phone buzzed. The first call I ignored. The third came with a message. Said, "Is this some kind of joke? Open the door." I didn't reply. The fourth call I answered mostly because I wanted it to be over. My dad asked why the locks had changed. My mom demanded to know who gave me the right to shut them out of what she called her home. I listened as they complained about their luggage sitting outside, about being tired from traveling, about how unfair it was. Not one mention of my wedding. Not one question about how it went or how I felt. When they finally stopped rambling, I said only this. "Live wherever you want. I don't want to know you anymore." There was a long pause. Then my dad asked where they were supposed to go. I told him he had a daughter who apparently needed them so much she got a free cruise out of it. Maybe she could offer a couch. He didn't respond. Neither did my mom. I hung up. 10 minutes later, the cameras showed them hauling their suitcases down the driveway, still arguing with each other. They didn't look back. They didn't knock again. They just left. Eric watched the footage with me. He didn't say much. He just placed his hand on mine and nodded as if confirming something neither of us wanted to say out loud. Cutting ties was supposed to be the end. But it wasn't. The moment they walked off the property was the moment the real trouble began. They weren't gone more than 48 hours before the next move came. It started with a voicemail. My mom's voice was eerily calm. Too calm. She said they'd talked it over and decided they were ready to forgive me. That they understood my stress, and that it wasn't too late to move past everything. She actually said that, "Forgive me." Like I was the one who ditched their wedding, stole money, and threw a tantrum over locks. I didn't respond. I didn't even listen to the whole thing. Then came the second voicemail, not from my mom this time but from a woman named Cheryl. A lawyer. Or at least someone pretending to be one. She left a vague message saying she represented my parents in a dispute involving rightful property and residence. That's when it hit me, they actually believed the guest house was theirs. It made sense in a sick way. They'd lived there for almost a year. Had mail sent there. Changed their address on documents. My mom even bragged once about downsizing when she moved in, like it was part of a retirement plan. They were squatting with permission and they twisted it into ownership in their heads. I went straight to Eric. He didn't even blink. Just pulled out a folder and handed me the property documents. Title in his name. Deed in his name. A signed agreement stating the guest house was a temporary arrangement while my parents got back on their feet. No lease. No rent. Nothing binding. He said let them try. A week passed. Then another. No lawsuit. No notice. Just more voicemails. Some soft and guilt-ridden, others pure fire and brimstone. My dad left one saying he was disappointed in the person I'd become. My mom sent a text saying they'd sacrificed everything for me and this was how I repaid them. I didn't reply. Then, without warning, my cousin Jenna messaged me on Facebook. I hadn't spoken to her in years. She asked if it was true that I'd kicked my parents out of their house. Said my mom called her crying, saying they were essentially homeless now, wandering between motels and sleeping in their car. None of it was true, obviously. I saw the bank transaction from their hotel on my credit report when I was unlinking accounts. But my parents were making their rounds, spreading lies, rewriting the story in real time. I could feel it. Jenna wasn't the only one. A few distant relatives unfriended me. One sent me a message calling me cold. Someone else, a childhood friend who still kept in touch with Kayla, posted a passive-aggressive quote about family betraying family over money the day after. I never said a word. Not publicly. Not privately. I wasn't going to beg people to see the truth. But then something happened that almost made me fold. A woman from church, someone I barely knew, messaged me on Instagram. She said she'd run into my mom at the grocery store. My mom was sobbing, saying she didn't know where to go, that she'd been evicted from her own daughter's home, that she hadn't eaten in 2 days. The thing that broke me wasn't the lie. It was what she told the woman next. That she was trying to be strong because she had cancer. I sat with that message for a long time. My mother does not have cancer. Never has. I told Eric. He was silent for a second, then said, "You know what this is, right? She's escalating because she's losing control." And he was right. But that wasn't even the worst part. That night we got a letter in the mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single photocopied page. A fake rental agreement with forged signatures, claiming my parents had a right to live in the guest house for 5 years rent-free. They'd backdated it. The signature next to mine didn't even match. It was a clumsy attempt, but enough to see what direction they were heading. They weren't just trying to guilt me anymore. They were trying to trap me. Wiggly. I stared at the paper and I finally felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Already. They wanted a fight. They were about to get one. I didn't even get the chance to call a lawyer before my mom brought the police to our house. It happened 2 days after we got the forged rental agreement in the mailbox. Eric and I were in the middle of dinner when the doorbell rang. He checked the camera. A police officer was standing on our porch, hands on his belt, my mother just behind him. Arms crossed, chin up, like she was the victim in some drama. Eric opened the door. I stood behind him, silent. The officer was polite but clearly annoyed. Said he was there to check on a reported eviction dispute. I glanced at my mother. She wasn't crying. She wasn't broken. She looked smug. I stepped forward. I said there was no dispute. The house belonged to my husband. My parents had been staying temporarily in the guest house, and we had documentation showing it was a courtesy, not a legal rental. I even offered to print the original agreement we had. The officer nodded, clearly getting the picture, but said he still needed to hear both sides. My mom launched into a well-rehearsed monologue. Said we'd promised her a home. Said they'd invested in renovations. Said we were refusing to let them in out of spite. She even dropped the cancer lie again right there in front of a cop. Said she was sick and didn't know where she'd be sleeping that night. Took everything in me not to laugh. Eric went inside and came back with a folder. He handed the cop the title, the signed agreement, the documents showing my parents had no lease and paid no rent. The officer read it, nodded again and said, "Okay, well, this clears things up. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do here." My mom looked like she'd swallowed glass. The officer turned to her and said she had no legal right to enter the property, and if she tried again we could press trespassing charges. He was firm but not unkind. She didn't say another word. They left. She didn't even look at me. The minute they were out of sight, I sat down on the stairs and just exhaled. I'd spent so long thinking if I just did the right thing, eventually they'd come around. If I proved myself, if I worked hard, if I didn't complain, they'd finally treat me like I mattered. But this wasn't disappointment anymore. It wasn't even resentment. It was war. The next morning I called a lawyer. I handed her everything. The fake rental agreement, the bank attempt, the police visit, the messages, the entire pattern of financial manipulation. She barely blinked. Said she'd seen it before. Called it financial and emotional coercion, especially common with parents who think their children owe them something forever. She asked if I wanted to pursue legal action. I asked what kind. She smiled and said, "We can start with a cease and desist. Then if they try anything else, a restraining order. They've already crossed a line." Eric paid the retainer that same day. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't need to. But apparently Kayla found out. A week later I got a message from her. It said, "How could you do this to them? For our parents." I stared at it for a long time. No apology. No acknowledgement that they skipped my wedding. Tried to steal from me. Lied about cancer. Brought the cops to my door. Faked legal documents. Just guilt. Like always. I didn't reply. I just blocked her. But then she showed up. Unannounced. At our house. And that's when things got dangerous. It was a Thursday early evening. I remember because I'd just gotten home from work and was halfway through changing into sweats when Eric called from the driveway. He said, "Kayla's here. And she brought someone." My stomach dropped. I looked out the window and saw her standing by a white sedan, arms folded, talking to a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, maybe late 30s, wearing business clothes but no jacket. He looked ready. I walked outside before Eric could say anything else. Kayla lit up when she saw me, but not in a friendly way. She looked satisfied, like she thought I wouldn't dare come outside. She didn't waste time. She said, "We're here to take a look at the guest house. Mom and Dad are moving back in." I laughed. Not nervously, loudly. came out before I could stop it. I asked her what made her think she could just show up and do that. He pointed at the guy. This is Drew. He's with real estate. He stepped forward, said he was hired by our parents to verify the living space and assess whether they had a legal standing as tenants. He actually used the word claim. I told him calmly that there was no claim, no tenancy, that we already had a lawyer involved. He started asking questions. Was there a lease ever signed? Did they pay utilities? Was there any documentation that might suggest intent to reside long-term? I told him that actually there was a forged agreement that had already been submitted to our attorney. That stopped him cold. He shifted, cleared his throat, and said, then I'll need to step away from this. Kayla lost it. Started yelling at him, telling him not to back down, that we were bluffing. He turned and walked back to the car without another word. Now it was just her. She turned on me like she'd been waiting her whole life. Told me I was a selfish, vindictive brat. That our parents gave me everything, and I threw them away over one decision. He said I owed them. Said I owed her. That the only reason I had a house at all was because our parents allowed it. I asked her what exactly they allowed. Living in a home they didn't own? Lying? Stealing? Forging my name? She didn't answer. Just started crying. I stood there watching, but I felt nothing. Not anger. Not sadness. Just a quiet, hollow recognition that this wasn't a family fight. It was something deeper. Rot that had been there a long time. Then she pulled out her phone. Said she'd record everything and show the whole family how I treated our own blood. Eric stepped forward then. Calmly but clearly done. He told her she was trespassing, and if she didn't leave, we'd file a report. She called us insane. Told us we'd regret this. That we had no idea what we'd started. Then she got in her car and left. We documented everything. Sent it all to the lawyer. The next week, we filed an official cease and desist against both my parents and Kayla. And for a while it got quiet. But the lawyer warned us. He said people like them don't just give up. They regroup. They wait. And sure enough, 2 months later, just as things felt like they were finally settling, I got a letter in the mail. A formal notice. They were suing me. And not just for money. They wanted access to the property. Damages. Emotional distress. They claimed I intentionally and maliciously evicted my sick mother and father, rendering them homeless. The number on the lawsuit? $48,000. I held the letter in my hand and said only one thing. They really think I'll break. But I wasn't going to. Not this time. The first thing my lawyer said when she saw the lawsuit was, they're bluffing. But it didn't feel like a bluff when I was standing in a courtroom 4 weeks later, watching my own parents sit across from me, heads tilted in that same wounded way they always used when they wanted sympathy. My mother even wore a scarf around her head. Subtle, like she was hinting at chemotherapy without actually saying it. My dad sat like a statue, arms crossed, barely looking at me. The suit claimed wrongful eviction, verbal harassment, infliction of emotional distress, and, absurdly, theft of property. They included photos of the guest house decorated with their furniture, my mom's personal belongings, even the dog bed they'd bought for a pet they didn't have anymore. They wanted money. An apology, I guess. But more than anything, they wanted control again. The judge reviewed our paperwork. Deed in Eric's name. Documentation showing no lease, no rent, no verbal agreement of permanence. Screenshots of texts. The forged rental agreement. The police report from the day they tried to enter. The letter from the realtor they'd sent to our property. My lawyer spoke clearly, calmly. My parents' attorney, a discount guy who looked like he barely believed his own case, kept pushing the emotional angle. About how I'd turned on my family. About how they were abandoned by the daughter they supported. When the judge asked for proof of that support, they had nothing. When asked if they had any receipts for rent paid or any lease, nothing. The judge dismissed it all. Every single charge. Case closed. They lost. And I thought that would be it. But after court, as we were walking back to the car, I saw them waiting in the parking lot. Just standing there. My mom looked different. Not weak. Not angry. Just cold. He said, you made your point. You won. But don't expect to be welcome when you come crawling back someday. I didn't say a word. I didn't even stop walking. Eric had his hand on my back the entire way to the car. I don't remember breathing until we pulled out of the lot. A few days later, Kayla messaged me again. From a new number. Just one sentence. You destroyed this family. Maybe I did. But if I destroyed anything, it was the illusion that they could treat me like nothing forever and still expect loyalty. It's been 6 months. I haven't spoken to any of them since. Eric's parents? They hosted our second ceremony, a small one with friends, laughter, and real family. Judy cried when she gave her toast. She called me her daughter. They never once brought up the lawsuit. Never once made me feel like I owed them anything for loving me. Sometimes people think family is sacred, unbreakable. But blood doesn't mean anything if it's been poisoning you for years. I gave them every chance. They made their choice. And I finally made mine. I'm free.